All right. Welcome, everyone, to Dive Talk episode number 13. Today, this is a very special episode because of a variety of reasons. I think number one is because it's the first one we do live. We're streaming live right now on the internet. And the second one, hold on one second. What is going on here? Huh. What is playing? Oh, I know what's happening. Hold on. I had the stream open, so that's why it happened. So let's try that again. Yeah, welcome everyone to Dive Talk episode number 13. This is a special episode, as I mentioned, because of a variety of reasons. Number one, we're streaming live, which is awesome. We've never done that before. And we're also interviewing Jonathan. Finally, we're able to get together and talk about this. I have 1,000 questions about the aquarium and about what you do at the aquarium, but this was actually not my idea. This was Woody's idea. He wanted to talk about differences between recreational diving and commercial diving. So I'm just going to let you take over from here, man. Go ahead.
I'm busting out of this seat right now to jump in. I'm super excited about this show. So let me set the stage a little bit. The Georgia Aquarium is very interesting because the dive program there consists of staff that are employees of the Georgia Aquarium. We have divers that are full-time employees of the Georgia Aquarium, but a lot of the environments are cleaned and maintained by volunteer divers. It's actually a brilliant way that they set it up. Well, pretty much in charge of us, I'm one of the volunteer divers, is my friend and in a way my boss at the Georgia Aquarium, who is also the dive safety officer there, Jonathan Langham. And so I said to myself, I learned so much from you throughout the training, which I know you're going to talk about the different progressions we can have there, differently than I learned anything with my recreational diving, because we're under, you'll explain, some commercial standards. So before we get into those specifics, obviously tell us about yourself. Tell us what your current job title really means, and then how long you've been diving, and then where you are as a recreational diver, because you love diving recreationally as well. And then after we hear from you about yourself, we'll get into the specific questions about your role at the Georgia Aquarium.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, y'all. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Jonathan, and I'm the dive safety officer at Georgia Aquarium. I also manage the volunteer divers. I've been there since July of 2011, so next month I hit my 9-year anniversary.
Nice.
And it does not feel like it's been 9 years.
Wow.
I felt like I stopped working 9 years ago.
Nice.
Before that, my background, I was a paramedic. Used to work for Grady EMS and for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
Nice.
And was a flight paramedic for them. So ever since I've graduated high school, I went straight into paramedic school and had a nice career working on the ambulance and the helicopter. I got certified in 2001 when I graduated high school. My parents, actually, that was my graduation gift, was getting certified.
Wow. Nice.
Well, the
did
funny
they,
part,
did they dive, by the way? Is that why they gave you the gift? It was like, oh, we want you to, we want to go on vacations and, we want to bring you.
No, the funny part is I read the open water manual in 7th grade, got hooked then, wanted to get certified, and my parents said, nah, it's just a phase. You'll get over it. So between 7th grade and my senior year of high school, I read the manual 7 times.
Wow.
And that's what they got me for my graduation gift.
Nice.
And I've been diving ever since. I've got over 1,000, maybe 1,500 dives under my belt.
Nice.
I started at the aquarium as a maintenance diver in our dolphin habitat. And once I got my rescue diver, I went straight in and started getting my dive master, worked on my instructor. And right now I am a recreational instructor. I'm also a technical diver as well as a cave diver. And I am a
I'm about to
rebreather.
high five you on the can't touch, but I'm air fives.
I also dive the Poseidon 7 rebreather. I'm an instructor on that, and I dive the Hollis Prism 2 rebreather.
Awesome.
And I am just one of those. I loved to just continuously increased my education in diving. The aquarium has really afforded me a lot of opportunities to just expand my knowledge in diving and just the animals in general.
Absolutely.
So
How do
can
you
we-
just
go
a
ahead.
follow-up question though, because I know you have a ton
Yeah,
of questions, so you want to get to it, but I'm curious about this. How do you end up being like a maintenance diver in the first place? Did you just go to like monster.com and look for jobs and it was just listed there and applied, or how was that?
So I'm from South Alabama, and I finished school down there, and I just moved up to Atlanta. And the day I moved up, I found out that Atlanta was getting an aquarium, and I said I'm going to work there one day. And this was back in
2005, right?
And well, this was 2004,
Oh wow. Okay.
January 2004. And so construction wasn't even going on, but I was determined to be on the dive team at the aquarium.
Nice.
And I started looking at volunteer diving, and there was like a really long wait list. I wasn't an instructor yet, so I didn't meet the job requirements for the initial, round of volunteers and staff that came in. So I just kept on working on it, and then once we opened the dolphin habitat up, it was about a month after I got married. I got on the aquarium's website like I would do every now and then to check for jobs, and there was a maintenance diver position.
What?
I almost did not apply because I didn't
Like this
meet-
can be real.
right?
This is yeah.
Yeah, it was. I almost did not apply because I didn't meet all the qualifications, and my
Right.
wife said, "Just,
Go for
just
it."
apply, just go for it." And 9 years now, I'm here.
Absolutely.
Still there.
You're
That's
here.
awesome.
So I think it's safe to, at this point, for our listeners, can we check the box of a highly qualified dive professional
For
with us?
sure.
Right? I mean, that was a lot of. Okay, so that's awesome. But what's really interesting is I want to talk, because we don't get a lot of chance to do this, about your role at the Georgia Aquarium more specifically. So briefly, give us a rundown of what a typical week for you would be as a dive safety officer. I don't think people understand, what does that mean, a dive safety officer? What
Just
does it
make sure the
mean?
tanks are full. Like what?
Right,
What?
make sure you're safe, I'm safe, or what is a typical week?
Well, so we have to comply with OSHA's commercial diving regulations because we are considered commercial diving. So there are certain things that we have to do. And my job is to make sure that we comply with those standards per OSHA and with the American Academy of Underwater Sciences if we are doing scientific diving. So like we're out in the field conducting research.
So
I have a question about that though. This just came to me, and I don't know if you can answer it, but how come the aquarium has to abide by those commercial standards, but dive shops and dive operators around the world don't really abide by, like, because we're talking about the difference between commercial diving and recreational diving. I mean, those guys are making a living out of diving, so they're clearly a commercial operation.
Yeah, so they go with WSRTC, the World Scuba Recreational Training Council.
Right.
So they have those certain standards. This even for public safety diving, it's different dealing with OSHA 1910 subpart T, is if you want to get official about it. So when you're thinking of like commercial divers, the hard hats, the just the different tools that they're using, we're thinking of doing like working underwater with tools. We don't weld, but that is a big part of commercial diving as
That's
well as welding and stuff. So that's what more differentiates is on a recreational side, they're teaching people and taking them on dive trips. And so there's even more standards when we have to deal with the working type
Tools and
diving.
stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Tools and stuff
Makes
like
sense.
that.
Okay. That's a lot that we said, and we're making assumptions that our listeners, and I don't want to do that, understand what we're even talking about with what commercial diving standards are. So I want to back up for 1 second. Give me one example of what would be a commercial diving standard that you're implementing at the Georgia Aquarium for all of us and for yourself that we aren't seeing in recreational diving, so we can kind of get a picture of what we're talking about.
All right. So a couple of things that we do is, for one, we do dive debriefings every single time. We check our divers' gear first, just making sure air is turned on, everything is connected like it's supposed to. We also have certain things such as releasable weight systems, for example. We can't. You have to dive with releasable weight in order to be able to to get back up if you have to ditch it. Another thing as well is we require an emergency gas supply for all of our divers. Yeah, we might be in 5 or 10 feet of water or 30 feet, such as our Ocean's Voyager habitat.
Right.
But we always keep, and we actually use spare air and it stays right on our side, and we train on that as well during our orientation dives. And so that's another big thing of dealing with commercial diving. And now even commercial divers, depending on what depth they're at and all that, they also have to carry certain types of gases with them as well as backups.
Wow, even those, because some of those guys are like at 1,200 feet, or like they go pretty deep. Like the people welding,
like the saturation diving and stuff.
Divers,
that's a whole. I'm not trained on saturation diving.
It's a really interesting topic all
yeah,
itself. But,
yeah, it is.
But what's interesting about what you just said, and what I'm trying to get to, is that we do dive briefings before every single dive at the Georgia Aquarium. It's mandatory. When we get out of the water, we're checked, right? That tender who's watching, and that's another thing we have. We have a dive tender on every single dive, checking our pressure before we go in, checking our pressure when we get out, asking us, "Are you okay? Don't fly, within 24 hours." So,
and before you jump in the water, what's the last question you get asked?
are you mentally and physically ready for this dive? Now think about those things. Why are we not doing those on every single recreational dive?
That's
and
what
you
I'm
know
saying.
what? We really should be. So when you think about it, that they're enforced, I know, Jonathan, we're not going to go into any specifics, but the safety record at the Georgia Aquarium for the number of dives that we do is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't know the specifics, and we're not going to talk about them, but it's safe to say it's overwhelmingly safe dives compared to the almost non-existent unsafe situations that have happened there.
Oh, definitely. And, some things that I see in the recreational dive industry is, you might have paying customers that come and jump on the boat. We don't know their experience level,
Exactly.
anything like
Exactly.
that. And a sad part that I see is people pay, $80 or $100 to go dive, and they're going to lose that if they sit out on that dive. And, it almost seems that some people monetarily,
I have to go. Yeah.
I have to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing for us is I will tell people we can cancel the dive if we have to. I mean, if you are not physically or mentally prepared to jump in the water, please do not. And I also, as far as our tenders and our DPICs is what we call them, our designated person in charge, if they notice a diver that does not seem mentally or physically prepared to dive, we are in full support of them not allowing that diver to
Just
jump
red
in the
flag,
water.
raise your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, and the first is diver safety is what we focus on.
Yep.
And that's the last thing I want to see is one of my friends. I mean, I've got almost 300 divers, that staff and volunteers included. I don't want to see any of them get hurt. And they're all my friends. I love them to death. I mean, I've been with them for so long. A lot of us hang outside after work. So, that's the last thing I'd want to see on someone. I would rather them sit a dive out.
And it feels
and
so
that's
good to be diving in that environment, knowing that that's the attitude from the top.
There's no
'Cause
pressure.
This is the top right here. This is our boss saying this to us. You just know we got you. We got you as an organization in this diving, and that makes the diving more pleasurable and actually more effective.
And the way I tell people in
That's great.
orientation is, I said, y'all, whenever I look at this, if I decide I'm going to dive or not, I mean, you heard my story. I mean, I've been obsessed with this since 7th grade, and I love what I do too much to risk it to blow an eardrum or something to where I could never dive again. I have no problem sitting a dive out because it's going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, why not? You don't have to do it.
And this is the exact message I was hoping to get across on this show, is this attitude that we're talking about, which is commercial diving standards. This is how we should be diving in every single situation. Okay, let's move on. That's beautiful because it's leading into some of our other discussions. So with that said, look, it's hard. I know you love your job. That is obvious. You're enthusiastic.
I couldn't tell.
You're an amazing instructor when we're there. You love to see us grow, and we're going to get into the growth that we can get at the Georgia Aquarium. But if you had to pick out one thing, one specific thing, because I think it would be interesting to hear, and I don't know this answer, what is your absolute favorite part of your job?
There's so many different parts of my job that are just my favorite because, I mean, each day is different. Is one day I might be waking up to go do a swim test for new divers coming in, or teaching a day in diving first aid for professionals class, or running extrication drills in our habitat so we can make sure our divers are prepared to respond to an emergency if that were to happen. And then obviously, the field diving, I've got to go to some very cool places in my career here. So it's definitely, spending 3 weeks out in Indonesia and Cendrawasih Bay was pretty epic. To be able to see just all these whale sharks out there and be able to, do health assessments on them with our research and conservation team, or going down to the Keys and doing a 4 or 5 hour night dive on a rebreather and watching corals spawn with the Coral Restoration Foundation.
Awesome.
I mean, the first time I saw coral spawning, I mean, I just got chills underwater. I was like, oh man, this is so much more magical than what I thought it was.
So cool.
And I mean, just watching nature happening and knowing how it happens.
So
and, just being able, like, I did a trip last year to the flower gardens out in the Gulf of Mexico. And it was a week liveaboard diving, and we were doing lionfish surveys to see how lionfish have impacted the reefs out in the flower gardens.
Amazing.
And this was cool. This was a liveaboard boat. We left out of Texas about 124 miles offshore. And
wow.
Just letting on there for a week.
This is through the Georgia Aquarium.
Nice.
This was through the aquarium.
So really the Georgia Aquarium is spearheading a lot of environmental stuff outside of the Georgia Aquarium.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, like a study like that, and then sharing that information with the world.
Exactly.
So much good comes out of the Georgia Aquarium outside of the aquarium itself.
Yeah, and that's not even just the diving. I mean, we've done stuff with sand cob out in South Africa, dealing with the African penguins, for example, and going up to Alaska for beluga whales, and doing dolphin health assessments with the Indian River Lagoon. And we've also, and these are all non-diving stuff.
Yeah.
And then we've also done manta ray research off the coast of Florida and putting receivers out there to be able to, all animals that are tagged off the coast. We are part of a network of an array of receivers up and down the Atlantic Ocean.
That's awesome.
To track this. And then, we've dealt with spot a shark, so it's a photo. It's a photo ID project off of North Carolina, and what we're doing is we're doing photo identification of sand tiger sharks on the wreck, and we're able to identify these sand tigers, put them into the database, Spot a Shark USA, and they they're able to track these animals to see where they go.
That's
and,
awesome.
And up and down the East Coast and all
That's
that.
all diving with a purpose. I really enjoy that. But the cool thing about it is that I keep watching these videos. Either it is on the aquarium, the TV show, or whether it's at the aquarium actually watching videos. And there's always like, our divers, went to Indonesia, whatever. I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
Who are these?
Right.
Now I know. I
Right.
finally can put a face to the name.
Well, I'm going to deviate from what I wrote because you're making me think of things, and it's awesome what's going on right here. We are at the Georgia Aquarium, and I have to pinch myself every single time I get into the Ocean Voyager. That's one of the largest environments in the world, if not the largest environment in the world. We have over 1,000 animals, over, I think, about 100 plus species. So what I'm getting at here is, Jonathan, the other thing that you're making sure of, that's part of the training that you give us, and I don't think the outside world understands, the level of care that these animals are getting and that we have to respect as divers in that environment, right? This is their permanent home. I cannot even express to the public, if I was a fish or a mammal, I'm like, how do I check into the Georgia Aquarium?
I understand.
From the food to the cleaning, right? I mean, it's very, very strict protocols. But with that said, you have to make sure that there's a lot of checks that you have to do on us, from buoyancy control to rules and regulations and so forth. So it's just you have to really do a lot of training for folks to trust us to get into that environment with thousands of rare, some of them are pretty rare species as well.
Yeah, what we do is we require an open water certification to start. And from there, whether you're staff or volunteer, so our volunteers go through our volunteer services department. They have to do so much training, like just general orientation training for the aquarium. And then they fill out an application. We vet them through the application. We do a volunteer information session to where we go over the program. We also have volunteers that we've classified as diving mentors. And what they do is they help bring our volunteers through the program as well, basically hold their hand. And Woody's one of our dive mentors also.
I'm waiting for you, Gus.
Right.
I'm your mentor.
So they do their volunteer information session, the volunteer diver one. After that, we put them through a pretty rigorous swim test. And it's one of those, get prepared for it.
Yeah.
All right. It's, for example, a 400-yard swim, 50-yard underwater breath hold, 800-yard snorkel. I mean, and then all your other stuff like 10-minute water treads with hands above the water. And then we move into our dive skills, and then we actually grade you on how well you do your dive skills. Are you doing dive skills on your knees, or are you neutrally buoyant, or are you neutrally buoyant and properly trimmed? And we base that on a number score, and what we do is we're able to bring back to that person and say, okay, this is what we saw. This is what you need to work on.
It's awesome.
And
it's education.
And it's one of those things too, we want to teach people proper diving etiquette, because we want to make sure that, especially our divers, whenever they are, for example, on vacation, they don't need to be dragging their gear across a reef and damaging our reef. We want to make sure that we're producing divers out there that are going to be good stewards to the environment.
Love it. And that's such a great byproduct. And what about talking a little bit more though about what folks don't realize is that, okay, so you're at first going to do basic open circuit diving when you get to the Georgia Aquarium, but what else do you train them to do that they would never probably ever get to experience? It's like being an astronaut. That's the hint I'll give you.
I bet. So once we get them on, we do orientation dives. Everybody starts out on scuba. And so they're diving our habitats that we do scuba in. And then what he's talking about is this fun little type of diving called surface supply diving. And if you've been to the aquarium, you've probably seen some of our surface supply divers in our tropical diver habitat. They're doing a dive show. And what this is we have a cart that it was designed and built at the aquarium.
Yeah, it's awesome. And
other aquariums use it some as well. We've made a few modifications to it over the years and a couple different models, but basically it's like a dolly, and it's 2 tanks. It's got a whole manifold system on there. It's got a communications box, and our umbilicals, it literally looks like an umbilical cord that's plugged into our tanks. The tanks that are up top at the surface. The umbilical runs into the water, and all the diver's wearing is a full face mask, a weight belt, and a diving harness that has a small gas supply system on the back.
No fins.
Yeah,
no
fins.
Small environment, so now you're an astronaut.
I've seen them. They have these suction cups that they use to stick to the glass so they can.
If you're on the glass.
And,
or the acrylic,
and you don't have a big scuba tank on. Like this emergency gas source is, it's 8 cubic feet, I think is what it is. And so it's just enough. If there was to be a problem, you have a manifold block that you open it up and it gets you to the surface.
That's awesome.
So all of a sudden you're underwater, plenty of air. You have a tender watching, talking to you up on the surface. No fins, no tank.
And you feel weightless.
You feel weightless. You're like, at the beginning, you see the new surface supply divers, they're kicking, and they're like, nothing's going on, right? The kicking's not helping me. So you really learn. I think the surface supply diving really makes you a better diver on open circuit. You talk about buoyancy control,
Definitely. Yeah.
right? It's all in your breathing. It's totally you're in your breathing.
Yeah, you
There's
don't
no
have a
BCD.
BC
There's
all
right,
on
right?
it. Mm-mm.
It's just you and the water and air in a full face mask.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
it takes some getting used to because, for one, we don't want to put scuba in all of our habitats. They're just too small. We also want to make sure that we're not damaging, parts of the habitat, whether it's a coral reef or, bottom dwelling animals and stuff like that. We want to make sure that we're going to provide the best opportunity to keep those animals safe. And it makes the job also a lot easier on some things because if we're doing a longer dive, we don't have to get out and change tanks. Our tender is able to change our tanks for us, and we can just continue on and on. And like I mentioned earlier with the emergency gas supply, just a small tank, maybe about 8 cubic feet, that suits us there because it's a shallow exhibit. And if we were to do deeper ones, deeper dives, then obviously we would plan for more gas. So we make sure we have enough gas to get back to the surface for whatever depth that we're diving at.
Yeah, I have so many questions about this, but I feel like I would take the whole episode just asking
All
like.
right. So let's get into more with it because all right now, Jonathan. So a lot of the exhibits are surface supply, and here's one of the exhibits. Surely though, you wouldn't put divers in a tank with piranhas, would you? Or would you?
Oh, we do.
Because it's one of my favorite
Yeah,
dives.
yeah, that's one of the favorite dives there. People love diving with the piranhas.
And I think that's what's so surprising. Talk about that. What happens? What do those piranha do? I think there's a myth out there that all these certain marine life are just going to attack you when you get in, right? They're going to attack you. But what really happens?
No, so what happens is when we hop into that habitat, the fish will actually move to the side.
Yeah.
And
Stay
the
away.
diver will get in, and then once they get comfortable with the diver, they'll surround the diver, and people love diving with the piranhas.
They love it. So you see, that's just it, guy. Everybody, a lot of the marine life, they're really not that interested in us. They're not.
No.
We get in there with all kinds of different species. They're not interested in us at all. So that's pretty neat that we dive
Yeah, like
with
even
piranhas.
our sharks in Ocean's Voyager. I mean, it's cool to watch them, and they're just doing their thing. They're swimming around, being all sharky like,
Yeah. Frank,
And then
Doing shark stuff.
they're doing
Shark
shark stuff. And then you get to the ocean and you see the same behavior. Like the shark is just again doing shark stuff. It doesn't come up to you.
the most curious animal in the Ocean Voyager would be our 400 or 500 poundish green sea turtle. So you wouldn't think that would be the guy that would be. He's not looking to attack you, but he's into you. Let's just say at times he's like, let me be part of. If I'm doing a dive show, he always has to be in the dive show. He'll come up to you. He's like swimming in front of you.
I
It's
love
super
Tank.
Cool.
I love him.
Tank has a personality. That guy is like, and you know what? He knows he's the only sea turtle in that environment.
The only
and he's
reptile,
like,
yeah.
I'm the guy. Welcome to my Ocean Voyager. That's
Yeah.
what I always feel like when I'm going in there. I'm like, yes, sir.
Right.
Right. Okay.
It's even cool too, like watching some of the one of my favorite animals is it's a small fish called the Sergeant Major. And what's so neat about this fish, and you can see it when you walk through our tunnel, is you can see their little egg pouches that they've put on the rock. And as other fish or if divers swim up close to it, this little 4-inch Sergeant Major,
You're
he'll
about to
swim
die.
up to you to say, don't mess with me. And it's just so cool to, it's like this little fish, he's not scared of you.
I
But
know.
he's wanting to defend his babies. And it's just so neat to watch. I just love sitting there watching them defend their eggs.
If you're a diver and you have an opportunity to do one dive in your life that will stick with you forever, please come to the Georgia Aquarium and embrace our dive immersion program.
For
I'm
sure.
telling you, the ocean. Where else are you going to see this many fish at one time?
Yeah.
In a environment like this, it's absolutely incredible. Okay, this is leading to the next question. So we talked about at the beginning that we have divers there that are staff, they're employees, versus volunteer divers. What is the staff divers doing versus what the volunteer divers are doing?
So our staff divers, depending on what department they're with, whether they're in our mammals and birds department, dealing with the the penguins and the belugas and our puffins and sea otters and all that versus our fish and invertebrate staff that deal with, the whale sharks and all the other fish and tanker sea turtle and our coral reef habitat. They feed the fish, like the bigger fish. So we'll do broadcast feeds as well. They also serve as more of a leadership role as well. So they can tend, they can dive. They're also our designated person in charge. And then also in the water, they are our safety divers as well. So,
Cool.
they definitely, I mean, there's a lot of
There's
intermingling.
another commercial standard. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
We actually have a safety in the water watching you, not just on the surface. Yeah.
And also depends on the amount of divers we have. So we'll also put a second safety in
You
the
may have
water if
two.
we need
Yeah.
to. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that we keep those ratios down, and that way we're able to watch our divers. And that's even when you mentioned our dive immersion program. We keep multiple staff in the water with our divers to make sure our guest divers are staying safe.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's say, hypothetically, that we're in the Ocean Voyager. I'll just use that environment. What would be the commercial protocols to handle an emergency? For example, an emergency that may involve, let's say a diver is just becomes unconscious inside the Ocean Voyager. What are we trained to do in a commercial aquarium like this to save that diver and respond to that diver?
What we do also is, I said earlier that we have, you can be an open water diver and come in, but one of our goals is to get you up to at least the rescue diver level. And
Right.
and I will tell you, it's one of my favorite courses to teach. That is
Agree.
3
That
days
makes
of just
three of us.
super fun.
Totally agree.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And so not only that, but all of our divers have to take Dan's Diving First Aid for Professional Divers course, because we not only go through that course, but we also add some components of the aquarium so we can talk about our emergency protocols and the proper way to respond and things that would be particular to our aquarium. I also include that in our course.
Nice.
Because this qualifies not just our aquarium divers, but also our field divers as well. On top of that, we also do extrication drills. So we I
love those. And they're surprise attacks, by the way.
Right. And so what we'll do is we will practice anything from an unconscious diver, full cardiac arrest, to I'm just feeling nauseous. And it goes from there. And one of the things that I liked before the aquarium in EMS is when I used to fly, my medical director, we had to go in once a month and do these mock codes. And I will tell you, I learned a lot from those codes. And it made you learn. And I've taken that and I've moved it over to here, and I have come up with some very interesting scenarios with our divers. I've even had it to where they thought the diver in the water was having a problem, but they didn't realize that their tender was the one having the problem.
That's pretty cool.
And it makes you think, well, why would the tender have a problem? Oh, well, they were diving yesterday. Oh, okay. And so I try to get people to think outside the box. And then I'll change the drills to make it fluid. It depends on what you do. And it depends on how that person responds to that. And, I'm not trying to call fault or mistakes or anything. I want people to learn. I would rather you mess up in drills, and then if it ever happens, it's right. And so I want people to learn, and that's it's one of my favorite things to do. Is I'll throw curveballs in these drills, but it's worth it. And I've gotten a lot of positive comments from it. They get nervous when I come up with my CPR dummy in my clipboard, though.
We know it's coming. But
here we go.
But you see, that is just such an awesome attitude as a dive instructor and at the head of the Georgia Aquarium, that it's okay in your training to make mistakes. Like, that's kind of what you just said. In fact, that's when we're going to learn, and you embrace that and you throw scenarios at it.
You learn from your failures, not your success.
Practice. And you know what? We're all going to be safer, and I just love that attitude. Thank you.
And
for having that.
I trust all of our divers. I would go dive with them anytime.
Follow-up question to that, though. I know that when you are just a guest diver, you just want to do the dive on the OV,
Hmm.
you are allowed to bring certain equipment, like your computer, I think you're allowed to wear, but there's most of the equipment that you need, you don't bring it. You're not allowed to bring your own. You use the aquarium's version of it. Is that because of the alignment of the equipment with commercial safe diving practices, or because we just don't want to bring people's germs or whatever? We don't know where those, how they're
Yeah.
maintained or where they're coming from, and we don't want to expose our animals to that as well.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that is we like to have our own equipment. One, for we know when it's been serviced. We have a whole line of regulator technicians and equipment technicians, so we know that gear that they're using is top notch.
Which, by the way, even the volunteer divers can learn to be equipment technicians. That's part of the path, the opportunity
awesome.
that you have there. Yeah.
The other thing too is, again, we don't want to prevent. We want to prevent any potential contamination of outside stuff. So we allow our guests to bring in a wrist computer if they have it. It's not required. And also a mask, and that's not even required. So, but most people like their own mask, so they like to bring it. But we'll have guests that come up that didn't even know we had a dive program, and they get there and they sign up that day, and they're like, "I don't even have a bathing suit." We're like, "You're good. We got you."
Yeah, we'll give you a
Okay.
wetsuit.
And so we will make sure we decontaminate the mask and their computers. We even have a whole line of prescription dive masks. So if someone comes in and they need prescription lens, we have them across the board, so people will get a nice clear dive.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. Okay, so kind of near the end here, I want to describe the process of a volunteer diver at the Georgia Aquarium. A brand new diver comes in. He's hired. He's engaged. What are they going to do for, let's say, and for how long would they do that? And then what's the next level and the level after that? Describe our tier program, because I think it's absolutely phenomenal.
So our volunteers come in, and once they pass their swim test, they do their dive physical. Every diver does a dive physical, and we require that. I mean, you eventually expire on it, and we have a board-certified hyperbaric physician that does all of our dive physicals for us. And so
He's awesome, by
they
the
do
way.
that. Dr. King, I love him. He's great. So we do that. We do their orientation dive. They go through our DFA Pro course, our CPR first aid course. And after they get done with their orientation dive, that's when we assign them to our dive mentors, our volunteer dive mentors. And during those first 5 dives, they have certain standards that they have to meet in order to progress. And, if at the end of those 5 dives, if we feel you need a few more mentor dives, then we're going to give you a few more mentor dives before we release you to sign up for shifts on your own. Once you've done that, you will. That's when we will start looking at doing surface supply training. And then once we can get you surface supply trained, that's going to open you up to all the other surface supply habitats. But even with that, we have some easier habitats versus some harder habitats. For example, our tropical diver habitat has live coral in it, sea urchins and all that. We want to make sure that you're comfortable on surface supply before you ever get in that habitat, especially.
For sure.
And then from there, like Woody was saying, we do have a tiered system. So you'll start out as like a, brand new volunteer diver. Then you'll go up to like a level 2, level 3, level 4. And then that just opens up more opportunities for you for certain things, whether we do a big night dive in Ocean's Voyager. We do a big blitz cleaning dive, usually once a month. After that, it opens them up to do dive show. So when you're at the aquarium and you're watching the dive show in our Ocean's Voyager area, those are normally volunteer divers that are doing the show with a narrator.
And because you're answering as a volunteer diver live questions from our guest on the other side of the plexiglass. So,
and that's a whole training. So we want to make sure, that obviously you know how to, speak in public, but also knowing the information that you need to know to be able to answer questions. It's also full face masks diving. So we
And
even
maintain-
have,
And being neutral while you're talking is a
Yeah.
whole new skill.
and so while you're all, and it's wireless too. So that's the other neat part is it used to be a wired system. Now we're wireless, so we can actually swim around
Wow.
and talk and all that.
I haven't seen the wireless
Yeah,
setup.
that's cool.
I've only seen
Right
the
here in your
wire
headset,
setup.
it's all wireless
Yeah.
now.
That's awesome.
And for that, so we do a classroom training, but then we actually get the divers in the water and have them do practice shows. And then I think the fun part that they really like to do also is we have them bail out of their full face mask,
Yeah.
and they have to do a no mask ascent coming up.
Yep.
Because that could
Nice.
potentially happen.
Yeah, it could.
So we want to make sure that our divers are prepared.
I love the engagements, right? When we're in
Oh,
the
yeah,
dive show,
yeah.
what happens is we get to hold up a sign behind a bride. I put bride to be. That's basically asking her to get married to whoever the groom is, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand because she's picked out of the audience and asked a few questions, and we're swimming up as the dive show guys behind him holding up
Will you
this
marry
big
me?
sign.
I love it. Yeah, it's
and
great.
then he turns around and he gets on one knee and she turns around and reads the question. And they usually start crying, by the way, and we're
Yeah.
like, and we love it. We're like,
Oh, yeah.
we're on the other side of the glass. And
That's
fun.
awesome.
Get pictures with them
We
afterwards.
get pictures, and that's
yeah.
it. So
I
it
love
re-
holding the sign up.
Yeah. So,
I do see that in those shows they have at least two more divers that are just there. They're next to the person doing the speaking, just I guess for
Safety.
safety, right?
Yeah, so we normally have two dive show divers because we do two dive shows, and then a safety diver as well. So that's one of our staff members that's in there as a safety diver. Now, one of the neat things about when we went wireless on the dive show is when we were wired up, it could only be one diver at a time. Now, since we're wireless, both divers are able to carry on
So
the
much better.
conversation
From each
with
other.
the narrator.
That's
and
awesome.
so, it's actually provided a better experience.
The
No
other
doubt.
thing that I notice is that all of the staff, as long as they work in a habitat, they're at least open water certified. I mean, that's at least what they say on all the shows. They say all of us are open water certified. Do you guys also do that training, or do they go to a regular dive shop to do that?
No,
or-
we require open water and that's a big class. I mean, we've all taken open water. It's
Sure.
a long class.
that's
Right.
why it's just
Yeah.
a long process.
Yeah. And also, and we have dive shops around. We're not here to compete with other dive shops.
Of
we
course,
we
yeah.
want to make sure that they are able to train those. And
I don't know if you gave it like the aquarium spin, just like you did with that Dan class. If you were like, it's open water Georgia aquarium style, we're gonna do some different things. I don't know. I was just curious.
You're going to be looked at in terms of your buoyancy and trim, but
Yeah.
every diver should be having good buoyancy and trim.
Right, but I'm not talking about the divers. Right? I'm talking about just the regular staff, like the people just doing the show with the sea lions, for example. They are open water certified. At least that's what
Yes.
they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody, not every staff member that works with animals is certified. And I mean, so they're not divers, but but most of the staff that work with the animals are.
Yeah, all of the ones doing the dolphin show certified.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I don't know if they might be divers too. I just know that they mentioned that they're all certified.
Well, they love the water and they want to be underwater, with the animals.
Sure.
So, Gus, let's kind of wrap it up with this because I think it's very interesting. You kind of wrote out this question and thought of this one. Talk to Jonathan about the disconnect, right?
I
Because
know.
he likes to dive sometimes
Right.
and not necessarily be the safety officer. So, explain that question.
So the reason why I thought about this question is for me, I happen to do what I really love doing for a living, right? And because of that, I cannot turn it off. What I do for a living is I talk to businesses essentially about their challenges, and I bring in technology, Microsoft technology, to solve problems for them. That's what I do for a living. So whenever I hear a business struggling, financially, or we're really struggling to get new customers, or this product we can't sell it, like my brain immediately goes into consulting mode, trying to help them solve the problem. So you happen to be doing also something that you love for a living. Can you disconnect when you're out there recreational diving? Like, I get it if you're, the dive safety officer on these trips to Indonesia where you're representing the aquarium. But if you're just out there in the Bahamas or in Cancun and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go diving for fun. Like, I've never been, I'm going to do a drift dive here in Cozumel. Can you disconnect and like ignore the safety violations that will inevitably happen if you're really paying attention.
Yeah, like if it was at the Georgia Aquarium, Jonathan, I bet you'd be like, dude.
Yeah, I don't feel that I truly disconnect. I mean, yeah, I'm on vacation and I'm usually diving with my wife, or friends. But if I saw something on the boat, for example, that I was like, man, this person shouldn't be doing this. I mean, I'm not going to call them out, but I'm also not going to say, well, I'm so and so, blah blah. I'm just going to say, hey, I noticed this, and I'm going to just do it very, just very nice. I'm not gonna. I don't want to embarrass them, because that's not gonna do anything. But I will look around. Like, I know where my AEDs and first aid kits are, and I will be scanning.
You are prepared.
Yeah. Oh, and
Can't
I can
help it.
definitely tell. Like, okay, this diver might have potential problems. This is a good diver. And you can kind of tell sometimes being on the boat just with the attitude and all that.
So here's an example. So Woody and I went on a dive recently, like within the last couple of months. And when you go diving with this operator in West Palm Beach, they ask you, do you want the shallow boat or the deep boat? Deep boat is typically like up to 130, 80 to 130. That's what they're shooting for when it comes to wrecks and whatever, features they're going to take you to. And then the other one is like up to 60 feet or whatever, like pretty shallow. So we picked the deep boat. Obviously, we're on rebreather, so we want to go, 100 plus. And when we're on the boat, there's this guy there who's visiting from Africa. I think it was from it wasn't from South Africa. It was like Namibia, I think it was. And I was just talking to him, and I'm like, oh, how's it going? He's like, yeah, I'm from Namibia. I'm here because I work in a yacht, like a super mega yacht. Like, he's part of the staff. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So do you dive a lot? And he's like, no, this is my 5th dive. And I'm like, what do you mean, like 5th dive, like this weekend or whatever?
Yeah.
No, like I literally just got my open water. This is my 5th dive.
Yeah.
And we're going on a deep boat to a deep wreck, like 100 plus feet. So if something like that happens, are you like, all right, cool, good luck? Or like, are you able to just move on? Or would you be like, oh man, like I got to say something, or I'm going to can we be buddies? Like, do you go out of your way? Does your training kick in?
I will definitely make sure especially if we're in a group. I mean, I will keep my eye on them. Yeah, it's hard to just turn it off.
Right.
I mean,
Of course.
I mean, even as a paramedic, I mean, it just like, someone mentions to you, oh, I've got some chest pain or, or something, or you pull up on a wreck or so. Yeah. It's like, yeah, if I can help them and I'm safe doing it, then, cause I'm all about, personal safety and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to truly ever turn it off. I don't think.
But hopefully it's not to the point where you do not enjoy the dive because you're in that Jonathan mode.
Yeah, no, it's not that. And, I've definitely, my buddy is my wife. And so, my eyes are on her all the time. You know, and we've been in situations before where we're like, cool, let's not do this. We almost went for a swim in the Gulf Stream one time. And it was a humbling experience. This was a long time ago, but I don't have a problem even talking about things that I've personally done in my career. It's like, because again, you learn from it.
Of course.
I took a class, human factors in diving, and it discusses of again, like those human things that you think of, and should you do this or should you do that, and it's accident analysis, for example. So I mean, what could you have done different to fix this? And that's even, trauma is a disease, and we want to make sure that prevention is the cure. So let's identify that and prevent it from happening.
Yeah,
for sure.
Very cool. Well, the Georgia Aquarium is an amazing place. That is for sure.
sure.
We're very fortunate to have you, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you.
I've learned so much from you and will continue to learn from you. And for those of you who have not been there, and again, if you're divers, I can't help but shout out and want to tell you our dive immersion program is first rate in the equipment, in the briefings you're going to get, in the safety protocols that you're going to get, and then you're going to be diving in one of the largest exhibits in the world with over 1,000 species and more than 100 animals. It's mind-boggling. So please consider doing that. And thank you so much.
And
Yeah.
then one more thing about the immersion program is, like, especially for certified divers, we have a rebreather program now that we're able
I forgot
to
about that.
experience. People that have never dove a rebreather are able to experience that. And when the fish get even closer to you,
Yeah.
I mean, I had my wife come in and do the rebreather experience, and after she got out of the water, she goes,
We're buying one.
I never want to scuba dive again. I only want a rebreather dive. And I was like,
Exactly.
just tell me
I
where to
know
write
that
the check.
Exactly.
I know that feeling. Yeah, and for me, I'm again super excited to have you on the show as well. I think that the dive program at the aquarium doesn't get enough credit. And I think it's because of that safety track record, right? If we were having all kinds of issues and accidents, you would hear about the dive program negatively, but you don't hear about it because it's such a good track record in safety. And it's interesting, when I get to meet people out there, I recently met someone who was talking about how awesome their experience was at the OV. They did the dive there, and, we were just talking about it and all of that. And somebody asked about the cost, and the person said, I have no idea. And they were like, well, what do you mean? Like, was it a gift or whatever? It's like, no, I'm a veteran, so I got to do it for free.
Oh,
So a lot of people just don't understand how much the Georgia Aquarium does and the dive program does for people like that, veterans, people with disabilities. I just don't think you guys get the credit you deserve. So that's why I'm excited to have you on the show, so people can understand all the great things that are done there.
And
Yep.
remember that the overall theme, let's wrap it up with this, was commercial versus recreational dive safety. That
Sure.
was the theme. And I want to repeat that the so-called commercial standards, well, really, we should be doing those for 90% of them in recreational diving. And the safety record of the Georgia Aquarium speaks for itself. These standards work.
They
right?
do.
And they
Yep.
keep you safe. And that's the purpose of really the topic of this show.
Yeah, and most of them came because of an accident or something happened somewhere, and
Right.
somebody put that in the standards.
Yeah, good point.
And
Well,
now
it's
we
like
don't-
the little
right.
blue book of cave diving.
Exactly. It's true. That's where we
Small
learn.
little book, but
like-
it explains all cave diving accidents, and this is why there are certain rules in cave diving.
The 5 golden rules.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we should take 2 lights. No, maybe we should take 3 lights. Right?
I think I take like 7.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, this was fun. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in. We have a few viewers online. No questions came through, for Jonathan or
But
for
they
us.
may. You can keep posting questions
Exactly.
later.
Absolutely. You can keep posting comments and questions later. DiveTalkMedia.com is the website if you're watching online. The website is right at the bottom of the screen. You can leave us comments there. And obviously, you can always reach us at info@DiveTalkMedia.com as well. If you have any questions for Jonathan, we can relay them as well. And this has been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Air 5.